All right, folks, we are going to go ahead and get started here in just a minute. We're working out, I see we got a recording now. I'll go ahead and turn on my camera as well, and I'm going to try to do this without my glasses so we don't have too much of a glare there. Hi, everybody. Just a reminder for some instructions for today on your screen. Again, you will not be able to speak or to turn your cameras on during the webinar. You may, though, be able to use the chat. Okay, so that feature will be there for you to post any comments or questions today. So if you have any of those, I will be stopping periodically to take and address those questions. So let's go ahead and get started for today. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first event of the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences Week. My name is Helena Ferguson, and I'm the anthropology instructor here at Midlands Technical College and your host for today. Now, this event will be premiering the virtual museum exhibition that I have curated of anthropological fieldwork, titled Galleries of Anthropological Fieldwork, a virtual museum for field experience. Now, the reason for this exhibition is because fieldwork is the process through which all four, and we're going to learn about those here in just a second, subfields of anthropology conduct their research and then apply it to the world. What this exhibition does is it explores the types of field work that each discipline conducts and then how it impacts the world around us. When we were confronted with what to do for this event, we were really challenged with trying to find something that would showcase our individual disciplines and our pathways that are associated with those disciplines. Due to the pandemic and other limiting factors, I made a decision to do a virtual museum exhibit. I have experience designing exhibits. I have a certificate in museum management from USC. So this was actually one of the ways to kind of pull out dust off a few things that I haven't used in a while, as well as being able to provide something that I think would be very useful, not just today for today's event, but something that would live beyond this event. And it's a good way to just showcase the discipline itself and its applied nature, because anthropology is also a very applied discipline. Now that we have guided pathways as well, anthropology students will be doing a capstone project. This virtual museum that we're going to see is actually an enhanced version of that capstone project. So you will have the opportunity to see what these students will actually be doing once they reach the final anthropology course in that pathway. And one of the reasons for this, I actually did a similar project when I was in undergrad, because museum exhibitions are very helpful for showing students how to take really complex topics and pull the most pertinent information out of them. Now, one of the other things that was a motivation for doing a virtual museum exhibit is because as the only anthropologist at the college, I find that part of that job is explaining what anthropology is, even to my colleagues. Now, this exhibition gives me a unique way to educate about what anthropology is and what anthropologists do. Now, another awesome feature too of this exhibit is in its aspect of being virtual. I'll be able to use this resource in my courses in a dynamic way. In fact, I just used it today in my cultural class this morning to showcase some aspects of fieldwork in the cultural anthropology discipline. But it's also a really dynamic way to exhibit how we are teaching in today's fast-paced digital world. All right, well, let's go ahead and get to it. I'm actually going to stop share for just a second and share a cleaner version of the exhibit for us so we don't have to look at my browser and everything. So if you could bear with me for just a second, I will get that up. just 1 second and we will get that up. Hold on just a second, guys. Having technical difficulties. All right, guys, sorry about that. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. So the exhibit opens up with a title panel actually showing the dictionary lab at the Oxford Pitt Museum in Oxford, England. Galleries of anthropological fieldwork, a virtual museum for field experience. And when you enter into the virtual museum exhibit in this opening panel, think of these as panels, you can click just anywhere and you will enter into our museum lobby, okay? Now, when you come into the museum lobby, as you can see, we come into the ambience here with the help of the George Peabody Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. If any of you guys have ever visited this place, it's a place where they hold wedding venues. It's one of my very favorite museum venues. But we enter the exhibit here where we learn a little bit about anthropology in general. Now, anthropology is the study of the human condition through space and time. The discipline of anthropology is divided up into 4 smaller subfields. We have archaeology, biological anthropology, cultural anthropology, and linguistic anthropology. Now, these 4 fields give anthropology a multidimensional view of the world's cultures. And field work is one of the primary ways that anthropologists conduct their research. And so what this exhibit again is doing is highlighting each subdiscipline and its field work. So if you look here at the museum lobby, you will see many different galleries. There's 4 different galleries, okay? We've got one for each subdiscipline, all right? But before we move into any of the galleries, what I want to spend just a moment here is to show you the curator's office. Okay, and this is me, of course, me with a little bit shorter hair, right? I am the anthropology instructor. A lot of you already know me, so I don't necessarily need to go into all of my credentials. But the one thing that I do want to show that this also has is it has a link that will take us to the Midlands Tech anthropology pathway, okay? Now these links, they will open up in a separate window or a tab inside of your browser. So when you go into click on these, what you will find is it will open up into another browser. So let's go ahead and see if this will work here. Okay. So as you can see, this goes straight to our page here. I apologize for that. our page here on the associate's degree page for Midlands Tech website. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the gallery here. I'll see if I can get this to where we are back to stop sharing. It's what happens when I get off of the share, right? Here we go. I'm going to get us back. Hold on just a second. There we go. All right, so the pathway is linked there, which is really helpful because then if those of you that are interested in the anthropology pathway, you can click on that and go straight to that. But of course, we're using all of these navigation arrows here to be able to navigate through the exhibit. So we're going to go back to the museum lobby here. And let's go ahead and look at some of these galleries. Now, I do want, unfortunately for today, we're not going to have enough time to go through every one of the galleries, but hopefully you're going to come back and visit some of these other galleries that will not have an opportunity to visit today. But for the sake of time, I'm going to go through two of the galleries during today's walkthrough. And what I've chosen for today, of course, I'm going to choose the archaeology. Most of you know that I am an archaeologist by training, so I'm going to talk about that one. And then I'm also going to go through the cultural anthropology gallery. So let's go ahead and get started by clicking into the archaeology gallery. Now, when we enter the archaeology gallery, we enter the Sphinx Gallery at the Penn Museum in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, excuse me. In every gallery, there are the same types of panels. There's a panel explaining about the discipline. There's a panel that talks about field work in the discipline. And then there's another panel that profiles a specific field work in that discipline. And finally, we have a discipline-specific resource panel. So let's start with the most obvious panel audience will gravitate towards, and that is the what is archaeology. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. All right, archaeology studies human culture by analyzing the material record, objects people have made. They carefully remove them from the ground, things like pottery and tools, and then they map the locations of houses, trash pits, and burials in order to learn about the daily lives of people. They also analyze human bones and teeth to gain information on people's diets, their diseases that they may have suffered from. Now, archaeologists collect the remains of plants, animals, and soils from the places where people have lived in order to understand how people used and changed their natural environments. Now, the time range for archaeological research begins with the earliest human ancestors, millions of years ago, and extends all the way up through present day today. Like other areas of anthropology, archaeologists are concerned with explaining the differences and similarities in human societies across space and time. Now, archaeology itself, as a subdiscipline of anthropology, is actually divided up into two smaller subfields. We have prehistoric archaeology and historic archaeology. Now, I want you to look here for just a second, and you'll see that there are two words here that are highlighted on the panel. Whenever you're navigating through the exhibit and see these highlighted words, if you click on them, they will take you to a vocabulary panel for each subdiscipline. So let's click on one of these so that we can see the archaeology vocabulary panel. Okay, this does not seem to be working. I can show you here in just a second. There's the archaeology vocabulary panel. One of the other ways you can navigate through the gallery is also by navigating through the scroll and through the arrows. But if you're having problems with navigation, that's one way that you can also do that. But when we click on those words, they should come to this vocabulary panel. where if you look at, of course, the two that we just talked about, historic archaeology is the branch of archaeology that studies the archaeological records with cultures that have a written record. And this can be different for different cultures. And then, of course, prehistoric is the branch of archaeology that studies the archaeological record of cultures that occur before the written record. And that written record, depending on when it starts, is usually considered to be the starting point for history, wherever that is, okay? So we're going to go back to the what is archaeology here. Now, the other thing I want to point out as well, and I'm not going to, since, having some little bit of navigation areas, I don't want to necessarily take us too far off of the gallery here. But I do want to point out here, if you look down at the caption for these images, this image was taken several years ago at the Johannes Kolb site that's near Florence. But whatever the subject of these images are, I have provided links for more information on each of these. So if you want to learn more about the Johannes Kolb site here in South Carolina, you can click on this link and it will take you straight to the website that's associated with this particular site. So there's a lot of little tidbits of information that are in the exhibit as well that you can click on. Again, we're not going to take all the time, that much time today going through all of that, but there's lots to see in this exhibit beyond just what we have in the exhibit for what we have linked. All right, so let's go ahead and go back now to the gallery. And let's take a look now at archaeological fieldwork. All right, archaeological fieldwork starts with a research question or a threat. That's usually where the starting point is for archaeology. A research question or a threat to a site that may have some sort of archaeological significance. Now, these motivations are developed into research plans that give some framework to why fieldwork is necessary and how it will be done. Now, there's all of these fieldwork slides have the same questions kind of posed to them. So, I chose 4 commonly asked questions for each of them, starting with, where is archaeological fieldwork conducted? Anywhere people have been in the past where they have left material remains. Sites can be in remote areas or they can be in urban neighborhoods. Archaeologists use the material record, which is the deposited patterned ways in which people leave materials behind, in order to try to reconstruct past lifeways and behaviors. How is archaeological fieldwork conducted? Well, when a location of an archaeology site has been identified, archaeologists will use site survey techniques to pinpoint the exact locations of a site. Once an exact location of the site has been determined, a grid then is placed on the site that will then be used for site orientations and locations during excavations. Now, what is collected during archaeological fieldwork? Well, during excavation, detailed site mapping and careful recovery of features and artifacts take place. Each is carefully mapped and cataloged so that its precise location, its precise physical context is recorded. What happens after an archaeological fieldwork? Well, for every hour in the field collecting data, archaeologists spend several more in the lab, sorting, cataloging, and analyzing. Modern researchers analyze inorganic and organic materials using new absolute dating techniques. Experimental archaeology helps archaeologists understand how people made, used, or created archaeological sites. Now, the picture that's on that you see here on this panel was taken during the Mann-Simons archaeology project. This is a project that took place in downtown Columbia. It ran for almost a decade, where it recovered massive amounts of artifacts from an African American heritage site that spanned the time frame of slavery all the way through civil rights era, and all in one family. That was one of the most incredible things about this site. Now, if you look really closely in this picture, you'll see a younger, dirtier version of me in that white shirt. This was the project that I worked on, where I was kind of bitten by the archaeology bug. I did my first, excavations, research excavations on this site. I also taught my first field school at the site. So I've spent probably about 3 years working on this particular site, along with Jake Crockett, who's pictured right here in this red shirt. He was the PhD student who this was his dissertation project. Several of us did side work, right? It was a big project, so there was lots to be done. But the one thing I want to just point out here too is that the caption here has a link that will take you to a website for the Man Simons site, so you can learn more about the archaeology that was conducted there. Photo captions, again, throughout the exhibit will often have those links for you to learn more about the image context. So I really encourage you to take the time to explore those resources as you come across them in the exhibit. So let's go on back to our gallery here, and we've got still some more to talk about with fieldwork. So let's take a peek at a profile of archaeological fieldwork. The profile for the archaeological fieldwork that I decided to choose to highlight was the Pacoy Island Ring Complex. The Pocky Island Shell Complex is a cluster of oyster shell rings. These rings are part of a larger complex of prehistoric shell rings located from the central coast of South Carolina to the central coast of Georgia. All are believed to date to early in the second millennium BCE, which is the Archaic period. So in addition to shell, there are early archaic material culture like bone pens, stone points, and some of the earliest ceramics in North America. Now, the function of the ring shape is actually unknown, although the rings appear to be carefully planned in systematically deposited sites. As such, what we see is they present one of the earliest records of sedentary life among people who must have lived entirely by foraging. And if you know anything about foraging, those students who are in here know these guys usually move around a lot. So to have them staying in one place is something that's quite fascinating. Now, the Pacoy Island Ring Complex consists of several prehistoric shell middens. I actually have two different things that are linked on this slide, because we've got a lot of archaeologists that are working on this right now, not just South Carolina archaeologists, but we have archaeologists from all over the Southeast that are coming to work on our shell ring complexes. The link that you see right here at the bottom has to do with a documentary that was produced looking at the cultural aspects of the people who created these monumental structures. The documentary is almost half an hour though, so we're not going to watch this today, but I do highly recommend that you come back into the exhibit and watch the Ring People documentary, because I think you will really enjoy it, based on, especially if you're getting kind of like, oh, I want to learn more about that. But I do want to show you a short clip that I have embedded here from SCE TV, where the South Carolina Department of Natural Resource Heritage Trust archaeologists are talking about the site and its latest findings. So let's go ahead and watch this right quick.
In 2016, Hurricane Matthew hit South Carolina, reshaping its coastline. In the process of remapping, using satellite imagery called LIDAR, two shell rings were discovered on Pocky Island, located in the Botany Bay Heritage Preserve. Archaeologists chose to focus on the ring closest to the beach first.
Due to sea level change and rising oceans, we're losing this site at a pretty fast rate?
We're losing 9.5 meters of this site every single year at best case scenario. If current rates hold and we do not get hit by another major hurricane, we will lose this site by the year 2024.
We're doing what most people would call salvage archaeology, trying to get as much as we can before it's gone.
Excavation began in 2017 and has continued for 4 seasons. In the summer of 2019, the site welcomed nearly 1,400 visitors and over 400 volunteers who could participate in tours or help sift for artifacts.
Individuals from all over South Carolina came to visit us and help us screen.
Participate in the cleaning of artifacts and cataloging of stuff.
We take volunteers and visitors of any age and experience level and teach them about archaeology and South Carolina history and heritage. So just the other day, we had a toddler up at the screen on a stool sifting for artifacts, and we were teaching her how to ID things.
Visitors could also watch live demonstrations of shell tools. The archaeologists were also aided by Mississippi State University students who were asked to dig shovel test pits every 20 meters.
They're surveying the entire island for us. So we'll know where other locales are on this island that are producing either that period artifacts from the late archaic shell ring people or later, or maybe even before.
Colleagues from the National Park Service out of Tallahassee, Florida, also assisted with metal probing of the rings, confirming the LiDAR imagery was true. Dating the rings as contemporary with the first Great Pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. That's approximately 4,300 years ago. There are about 25 known shell rings in South Carolina and 60 on the East Coast. Typical shell rings or middens tend to be horizontal.
But during the late archaic period, for some puzzling reason, there are these donut-shaped rings.
The diameter of the rings on Pocky Island measure about 60 to 70 meters across, with the centers being between 20 and 30 meters. Mounds of shell make up the outside, with the center of the rings almost void of shell.
We've referred to these shell-free interiors as plazas, which implies some sort of maintenance of the area. You know, you keep it clean. But in fact, this was not an area that was kept clean. This is an area that shows that a lot of activity took place. We've got pits and posts and shell piles and things like that.
The archaeologists determined the first 6 to 8 inches of soil was overburdened from the ocean.
So what we decided to do in order to make this project go quicker and get down below the plaza where we can find features is to bring some heavy equipment and take that material off.
Another use has been to remove dirt piles out from under the screens.
We're very careful with how we excavate with those machines, and we're slowly training all of our staff to use them.
Some artifacts come out of the midden, while others wash up on the beach that have been washed out of the site. Items believed to be tools made from whelk shells are one example of this.
So what it looks like they're doing is using large whelks in a similar way to the way you would turn a rock into an axe. They're breaking it by striking it with probably another whelk, knocking a hole in it so that they can put a stick into it.
The archaeologists suspect they were sharpened by using small pebbles or possibly a juniper log with some wet sand, then used to chop down trees and hollow out dugout canoes. Some of the shells had 2 holes, suggesting they were used as both an adze and an axe. Another significant find has been the large amount of Tom's Creek pottery, which is the earliest known form of pottery in North America.
These punctations were applied with the marsh periwinkle.
Some students may even choose to do their master's and dissertation work on these objects. Jones also believes the pottery was used as hones or whets for sharpening bone tools used to stitch leather together. The archaeologist also found an exciting item made of deer bone and about the size of a pencil. It was decorated with concentric circles, nested diamonds, and cross-hatching.
You know, these are my examples currently of engraved bone pins.
The carvings tend to be located in the rear half of the pins, and the archaeologists have noted the special skill needed to achieve them, finding them difficult to replicate themselves.
And they appear to be ornate enough where they were some sort of a special item or maybe a status item of some sort, whether they were eating utensils, hairpins, garment closures, net making devices. We aren't really sure.
The pointy end is sharpened oftentimes and highly polished. And my speculation is that they're used in the making of basketry.
But figuring it out seems like half the fun.
Something like this came off the beach the other day.
Finally, a shell pendant was found, probably made from the interior spiral of a whelk, and some shell beads most likely made from the small shiny mussels that live in the marshes. A hole may have been drilled in the pendant and secured with a shell bead.
I've got a fancy version of my stone drill here. This is called a pump drill. We don't know that Native Americans use these, but we do know that they use small stone drills.
Columella in the area also has a lot of mother of pearl inside and a glitter-like exterior. Jones thinks the beads would be for more than just adornment, but also used as currency, like the Native Americans wampum, with purple or shiny beads being worth more than white. The artifacts are first processed by sorting them into paper bags in the field before being sent to the lab. There, they are washed with toothbrushes, dried, labeled, and placed in archival quality plastic bags. Artifacts are also entered into a database, sorted, counted, weighed, and studied by different specialists.
We'll photograph a lot of, particularly the pottery and the bone pins. We'll have a faunal specialist. This is a person who studies animal bones.
The specialists return information on the diet the people were eating here. For example, shellfish, turtle, deer, and hickory nuts.
Not out here for the artifacts per se. We're out here to recover artifacts and then learn from those artifacts. What are people doing with them? And therefore, what were their lives like?
The archaeologists still have many unanswered questions. And perhaps their biggest question, how did they deal with sea level change?
Just, we're having those problems to solve today, so that we don't lose our way of life.
The information they collect may help answer these lingering questions and help solve these unwritten pieces of history.
All right, guys, let me get my video back up here. So that is just a small little kind of taste of what the Pocky Island ring complex has yielded. I do want to just point out on this one, the documentary that's linked here also has mention of Pocky in it, and talking more about the cultural aspects of the people who created these rings. But I do just want to point out that the place where that entire video was taken has already been taken back by the ocean. So Sean Taylor, the archaeologist for SCDNR, was talking about how we're dealing with climatic, and sea level changes. We're dealing with them, even trying to recover this stuff. That ring complex that they were working on, they had to really quickly go in and get a bunch of information out, as much as they could last summer. Even during the pandemic, they didn't have volunteers like they normally do, which was a big undertaking the years before, because they knew that they were rapidly losing that site. And then in December, it got one storm took the whole entire archaeology site away. And it's so important that we understand that a lot of those types of archaeology sites are considered to be at high risk because of climate change and climatic shifts. They're sitting right on the coast, and many of them we know probably already fell into the ocean, and they've been lost, right? But the artifacts will roll up on the beach. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I do encourage you to come back and watch the documentary. It's a really good one, talking about the cultural aspects of those people. So let's go ahead and move on back to the archaeology gallery here. And I am going to see if I can get us back to the non-browser version here. It looks a little cleaner without you seeing my toolbar at the top. So let's go ahead and look at the very last panel that we have in here, which is resources. Every gallery has a resource panel also included in it. So if you click on that, you can go to the resource panel. which for some reason is not working. So I'll just go right there and scroll to it. I'm going to check some of these links here. But when you come across these resource pages, essentially what they are is they are web links, right? Hyperlinks to outside sources, resources. There's a lot more than this, of course, but I kind of highlighted where the most useful ones would be for students and anybody else looking for information on archaeology. But I also included a whole section on South Carolina archaeology. So I hope that you take some time, that if you're interested in archaeology, that you, if you're like me and you like to keep it local sometimes, right, we'll check out some of the resources surrounding South Carolina archaeology, because we have a lot of resources right here in our area to be able to connect you with cultural sites right here around you. Okay, they're everywhere. All right, let's get back over to the archaeology gallery here. Well, that's it. For the archaeology gallery, I didn't get to go through everything, of course, but I do want to make sure that you take some time to come back. I want to leave a little bit of something to come back to. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here and go into the museum lobby here and go ahead and get ourselves into the Cultural Anthropology Gallery, which is right up here. All right. Well, guys, this gallery opens to the beautiful Grand Salon at the National Museum of Archaeology in Malta. This museum has always been on my bucket list for its elaborate galleries displaying some of Europe's finest cultural antiquities. But let's start with our first panel. What is cultural anthropology? Cultural anthropology, sometimes it's called sociocultural anthropology, explores how people in different places live and understand the world around them. They want to know what people think is important and the rules they make about how they should interact with one another. Even within one country or society, people may disagree about how they should speak, dress, eat, or even treat each other. Anthropologists want to listen to all voices and viewpoints in order to understand how societies vary and what they have in common. Sociocultural anthropologists often find that the best way to learn about diverse peoples and cultures is to spend time living among them. They try to understand the perspectives, the practices, and social organization of other groups whose values and life ways may be very different from their own. The knowledge that they gain can enrich human understanding on a much, much broader scale. Now, the image that you see here on this panel is of anthropologist Kenneth Guest. Those of you that are in my 202 class, you know that he is the author of the textbook that we use for that course. Guest is an anthropologist. He's a cultural anthropologist that studies Chinese American immigrants and their connections back to China. This image shows villagers from some of the Chinese immigrants that Guest works with and the villages that they came to or came from China. And what he had witnessed was that the Chinese immigrants were often sending money back to and funds back to their communities in China as a way to support their family members and extended family members that are still in China. But the thing about this is it's a great example of anthropology in action, studying people in its multi-dimensional way in the modern world and all the connections that they have. So let's go back into the cultural anthropology gallery here and take a look at fieldwork. Now, cultural anthropological fieldwork today generally starts with a problem. You can see that we tend to address issues here. Modern cultural anthropology is shaped by increasing globalization, which is causing more of the world to be integrated into a connected economy. Cultural anthropologists shape their research questions so that they can study the changing world in the face of globalization. But ultimately, the hope is to apply the knowledge gathered by these anthropologists while doing field work to new problems and issues, helping newly integrated or changed communities deal with the issues related to globalization. Where is cultural anthropology fieldwork conducted? Well, today's cultural anthropological fieldwork is everywhere. Traditionally, the discipline focused on non-Western societies. With the continued integration of the world's cultures, cultural anthropological work today can happen anywhere. How is cultural anthropology fieldwork conducted? Well, participant observation is the most important method that is used in the ethnographic method. And this is one where the anthropologist participates in the culture. Typically, a cultural anthropologist will spend several months to a year with that culture or community they are studying, depending on what research questions are being asked. Now, what is collected during that cultural anthropology fieldwork? Well, like many social scientists, cultural anthropologists are collecting both quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data could be biological data or demographic data on a population. It could also involve things like environmental data that was collected by another scientist. The individual or small community, though, is the traditional starting point for cultural anthropologists. What happens after cultural anthropology fieldwork? Well, the anthropologist produces their findings in an ethnography. That's the eventual product of all of the cultural anthropological fieldwork. And ethnography is really specific because it's a particular account at a particular time and place. But those cultural ethnographies are then integrated into larger ethnologies, right? Where then comparisons and broad statements can be made about different cultures. Now, the image on this slide highlights anthropologist, and I'm going to have a hard time with his name because I always say too many manas, but his name is Elliot Rakatomanana, right? He's got a couple of nanas in there. But he studies malnutrition in Madagascar's Malagasy people. Now, Elliot's work really exemplifies the types of issues that a lot of cultural anthropologists work to solve through their field work, right? A lot of cultural anthropologists, the work that they're doing is directly attached to some sort of issue or problem. So if you want to learn more about Elliot's work, right, with the Malagasy people, I have linked a article to this image here that will take you to an article that talks about their culture, and it talks a little bit more about what they are facing. All right, let's go ahead and come on back here and get into our fieldwork profile for cultural anthropology. And for this profile, I highlighted one of the newer sub-disciplines. Just like, you know, archaeology has those two sub-disciplines of prehistoric and historic, cultural anthropology also has a lot of sub-disciplines. In fact, there's a whole bunch more in the sociocultural side of anthropology. And for today, I really wanted to highlight one of the newer ones, which is environmental anthropology. This case study looks at the Banabin people and their experience as being environmental refugees. Now, environmental anthropology is the study of how humans interact with the natural world around them. It's one of the leading disciplines of research, learning more about the Anthropocene. That's the present era in which human activity is reshaping the planet in permanent ways. Anthropologist Katerina Tewa brings us an example of this emerging subdiscipline through the story of the Banabin people in her ethnography, Consuming Ocean Island. Now, the ethnography accounts for the systematic removal of more than 90% of the island's surface, the Banabin people's relocation, and their cultural resilience in the face of such overwhelming global forces during the 20th century. Now, fertilizers containing phosphate are responsible for transforming barren landscapes across the world into fruitful farmlands. It plays a major role in how our planet has been able to sustain the over 7.9 billion people on our planet today. The phosphate on Ocean Island was highly concentrated and abundant prior to its removal. Being part of the British Empire, the Banaban people were forcibly removed to Fiji's Rabbi Island, or Rombi Island is what you'll hear them to say, after World War II. This allowed for the further removal of the island's surface, which is rich in phosphate. And today, the Banaban people, they still live on Rombi Island with their youngest generations only hearing stories of their homeland. Let's take a moment to watch this short little video listening to anthropologist Katerina Tewa talk about her ethnography consuming Ocean Island.
Consuming Ocean Island tells the story of the land and people of Banaba, a small Pacific island which from 1900 to 1980 was heavily mined for phosphate, an essential ingredient in fertilizer. As mining stripped away the island's surface, the land was rendered uninhabitable, and the indigenous Banabans were relocated to Rambi Island in Fiji. In this book, I tell the story of this human and ecological calamity by weaving together memories, records, and images from displaced islanders, colonial administrators, and employees of the mining company. My narrative reminds us of what is at stake whenever the interest of industrial agriculture and indigenous peoples comes into conflict. The Banaban experience offers insight into the plight of other island peoples facing forced migration as a result of human impact on the environment. The Banaban people have been living here on Rambi Island in Fiji, South Pacific Ocean, since December 1945, when the British literally dropped them off after World War II. This is where my grandfather, Tewa, is buried. Tewa's grandmother, Kiawea, and most of the people on Rambi are from Banaba, also known as Ocean Island. Our ancestors live here, along with the souls of many Gilbertese, Tuvaluan, Chinese, and Japanese phosphate mining workers, as well as their New Zealand and Australian managers, and a few members of the British colonial administration. This island is in the central Pacific Ocean, 1,600 miles away from Rambi. Most young people have never seen Ocean Island. They only know about it from the elders, who always talk about what the British and the phosphate mining company did to the Banabans. About 4 generations have now grown up on Rambi and know little of what some call the homeland.
Heaven knows how these people live. The Australian Prime Minister himself is a bit into his own parliament. And Australia and New Zealand have ridden on the backs of these people. And we have been the beneficiary at the end of the day, not only the Australian and New Zealand farmers, with the Bannabans being denied the knowledge of the plights at which their prospects have been sold.
All right. Get my video back up here so you can see me. So what we've got going on there in that video is a really good example of the type of cultural anthropology fieldwork that anthropologists will do. This one's really good too because we find that as we move into the modern era, we have a lot of anthropologists who do work on their own cultures, where they have gone and decided to study anthropology and then come back to help their own community. I do, if you're interested in the ethnography, I do have the link right here to that at Indiana's University Press, if that is something that you are interested in. We're getting kind of short on time. I told you there was a lot of stuff to go through. So let's get ourselves back over into the museum lobby. Now, I just want to point out here that I also have the cultural anthropology resources page that's similar to the one you saw in archaeology, that you, if you're looking for more just some resources more on cultural anthropology, you can go there. So let's get ourselves back over into the museum lobby, because I do want to point out just a few more things before we go that is also in the exhibit. I want to explore some of the other panels that are here besides the gallery, particularly right here at the bottom. The first one that I think is going to be really useful, particularly for those of you that are students in here that are interested in perhaps in majoring in anthropology. If you click here, you can, it's not working. If you click here, you will, you're supposed to go into the major in anthropology. There it goes. For some reason, the links are not working. Where I've answered, asked a whole bunch of different questions, and I'm not going to necessarily go through the content of this slide, just because many of you, many of you already know the answers to some of these, but it does talk about why anthropologists are important. It talks about what kinds of careers are there in anthropology. Short answer, lots. Okay. I've even linked in the American Anthropology careers page to show you not only what jobs are out there, but literally what jobs are out there, because this is linked to a job board too. So you can click there and enter the American Anthropological Association's career website, where you can see some of those jobs that are being advertised currently. And then if you're considering, the one thing I want to point out about this is, if you're considering changing your major to anthropology, or maybe even minoring in anthropology, what do you need to do? Well, the first thing that you need to do is talk to your advisor. Tell them that you're interested in anthropology as a major or a minor. But if you're looking to change your major, we'll need to change it to the MTC Anthropology Associate's degree. But if you're looking for a minor in anthropology, I want to emphasize this a lot. You may not need to change your pathway, but we may just need to look and see about a few course adjustments in your degree pathway. But that's going to be a discussion that's going to need to be had with your advisor, and possibly even me. So I do encourage you to talk to your advisor. I've got a link right here to the advising center, the Academic and Career Advising Center. And then again, another link here to the anthropology pathway. And I just want to point out the image on this screen. Those of you, again, that are in my 202 class, you know, we talk about the Rohingya, and we've talked about them. And of course, they are leading the headlines on news these days. But the anthropologists have been working with the Rohingya for a really long time, and studying their situation. So, you know, if you want to learn more about the Rohingya as well, there's a link right here that will take you to learning more about that. And again, that's top you know, news item right now going on with the unrest in Myanmar. So let's go ahead and take ourselves back over to the museum lobby really quickly. And I just want to one more, actually two more, but I'll be quick, I promise. The anthropology degree. This one, again, I'm not going to go through it all, but I wanted to really point out the image that's on the screen here. This is actually MTC anthropology students. Pre-pandemic, we were taking a tour to the Parker Annex Archaeology Center in Columbia, and we were working on real live sites, working in the lab, and students got to we have a whole lab that's associated with that. And so what you're actually seeing here, they're actually washing Pocky Island. The video that we watched, they're washing Pocky Island artifacts. So our students get a really intimate, up close experience with archaeology and the archaeological lab aspect. And this is a really good, all the students, they always enjoy this. This is a fantastic way. Now, of course, we haven't been able to do this during the pandemic, but Meg Gilliard, which was one of the archaeologists that you saw in the video, she's been visiting with us and talking about Pocky and talking about some other things. And she has, you know, DNR, Heritage Trust, has internships that are available to our Midlands Tech students as well. So we've got some that have all gone on to do internships in their lab at Parker Annex before as well. So one more I want to show you, which is just the credit panel here. And I'm going to be really quick here because I know that we're running out of time. There's a lot of people who've contributed, a lot who've contributed to the exhibit, including my nonprofit SCAPOD, which is the South Carolina Archaeology Public Outreach Division. That's the other hat that I wear besides teaching. It's dedicated to all things archaeology in South Carolina. I've linked each one of these to the websites for you to be able to visit them and learn more about them. But I can't leave today without giving a huge thanks to my husband, Keith Ferguson, and my mother, Mary Lopez. Both were relentless editors for me as I developed the exhibit. I'm very privileged to have a husband who has an eye for detail and a mother with an MFA in media writing. So that was very helpful when it came to do this. I could not have asked for better support. So that is pretty much it, guys. I'll end us on the museum lobby here. I'm going to take us off share here on this one and put us over onto the other PowerPoint that I had up, just to kind of remind us where we are going to be going. Just a second. So questions, please. I'm going to stick around since we run short on time. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that anybody has. But I do want to thank everybody. Please come back and visit the virtual museum exhibit again. We'll be posting the link for this. It will be posted. And don't forget that this is just the beginning of SBS Week, the school week for social and behavioral sciences. We have a whole bunch of other events that are listed at this website that you see on your screen that you can visit this week. I highly encourage you to take some time to do that because we got a great lineup. Tonight we have at 6 p.m. our Get Psyched opening night welcome event. So I hope for you to join us for that or any of the other ones that we have this week. And if you have any questions for me, you can stick around, but a lot of you know where to find me. Okay, guys? I will see you guys later. Thanks.